Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering draft video. It's how to draft MTG. This is our Lost Cavern of Ixalan beginners draft guide, draft overview, draft primer, whatever you want to call it. The set is out today on MTG Arena, so have fun drafting it, and hopefully this guide will help you win some games and get prepared for the format. As always, please click like and click subscribe to support the channel. It helps us a huge amount. And please leave your comments in the comment section along with your questions and anything else you want to say. I'd be happy to hear from you and chat about the format. For the beginners out there, for those who are new, what is draft? Draft is a limited format, which means you don't need to bring your own cards. You open cards and you play with the cards that you open. There are 8 players at the draft table. Each person has 3 packs. You open a pack, you take a card, you pass that pack to the left, and you repeat that process until all the cards are gone. Then you open the second pack, pass to the right this time, and same with the third pack, passing to the left once again. You're going to build a 40-card deck with the cards that you've drafted to compete with the other drafters. And MTG Arena, if you're playing online, offers Premier Draft, which is best of 1, so you play 1 game against each of your opponents, and Traditional, which is best of 3. First player to win 2 games wins the match, and that's how it'll be played at your local store or any in-person event like that. Each pack contains 1 rare card, 3 uncommon cards, and 10 common cards, along with 1 land. The packs will travel all the way around the table and back to you, meaning you can try to predict what your 9th through 15th picks might be for each pack. This is known as the wheel. Let's talk a little bit about some color pair, archetypes. Our 40-card deck at the end of the draft should follow one of these color pair archetypes. Each archetype has a signpost uncommon, which helps to define its game plan. And many of the archetypes focus on set-specific mechanics. So we're talking about color pairs, for example, white and blue, meaning our deck is comprised mostly of white and blue cards. There's 10 different color pairs. I've organized them into tiers here. You can use these as tiebreakers as you're drafting if you're thinking, oh, this card and this card are about the same, but one of them's green and one of them's blue. You might want to take the blue card. As you can see, the blue decks are a little bit more powerful than the green decks. So in tier 1, we've got white, blue, black, red, and blue, red. Tier 2's got white, red, black, green, and blue, black. Tier 3, which I say draft with caution. We'll talk about why in a little bit. Blue, green, red, green, and white, black. So green not looking so good in this particular format. Let's have a look at each archetype individually. We'll start with blue, white, which is a tier 1 deck in my opinion, possibly the deck to be drafting in this format. The signpost uncommon is called Master's Guide Mural. It costs 3 white, blue for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token, and it has the ability Craft with Artifact. And you'll see Craft on quite a few cards in this set. It's quite a powerful mechanic and one that you definitely want to be paying attention to. Craft with Artifacts, so you pay 4 white, blue in this case. You exile this artifact along with another artifact you control or an artifact in your graveyard, which is a very important piece of text as well. So keep that in mind that Craft works with cards in your graveyard. And then this comes back transformed as Master's Manufactory, which taps to create another 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token. You can do this every turn. Activate only if this or another artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So white-blue, all about crafting with artifacts. So we're looking for cards that create additional artifacts for us to exile when we're trying to craft, such as Waterwind Scout, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, we create a map token, which is an artifact we're going to look at in a second. Tinker's Tote, 2 and a white. It's an artifact itself, and it enters with 2 1/1 gnome artifact creature tokens. It can also be sacrificed to gain 3 life if you need to, which puts it into the graveyard, so it can then be used to craft from the graveyard if you don't want to craft with it right from the battlefield. You want that extra 3 life, you can do that too. And also we've got something like this, Orazka Puzzle Door, single blue for an artifact, 1 tap, and sacrifice it to look at the top 2 cards, put 1 into your hand and the other to the graveyard. So it puts itself into the graveyard as an artifact, it puts another card into the graveyard from your the 2 that you're looking at, and gives you a little bit of value. So a card like this that is itself an artifact and provides value for you is another great way to synergize with the craft mechanic. And we'll just look at map tokens real quick here since we mentioned them. A map is an artifact token. You can pay 1, tap it, sacrifice it to have a creature you control explore. Activate only as a sorcery. So explore is another thing we should talk about. This is an older mechanic, but for those of you who have not seen it before, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you put it in your hand. Otherwise, the creature that explored gets a +1/+1 counter, and you can choose to put that card back or put it into the graveyard. Very powerful. Anything that says explore is better than it looks. And then here's our gnome token, just a 1/1 token artifact creature. So creating a bunch of these tokens is going to be a great way to enable some of your craft abilities. All right, next we'll look at red, blue pirates and artifacts, another tier 1 deck for me. Signpost uncommon is Captain Storm Cosmium Raider. She's blue-red for a 2/2 legendary human pirate. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control. And this can happen multiple times in a turn, which we're going to be seeing in a second, I believe. So we want lots of creatures that are pirates and lots of artifacts entering the battlefield. Pretty straightforward stuff. So we're looking for stuff like Plundering Pirate, which is a pirate, and it creates a treasure token, which is an artifact token that can tap and sacrifice to make a mana. We're looking for artifact creatures that can come down and pump up things. This is Cogwork Wrestler, single blue for a 1/2 artifact creature with flash, which means we can play it at any point, even on our opponent's turn, and get a surprise +1/+1 counter if we have Captain Storm in play. And then when this comes into play, target creature and opponent control gets -2/-0 until end of turn. So really powerful effect there. And here's a real nice one for this deck, Cartographer's Companion, a 3-mana artifact creature. When it enters the battlefield, you create a map token, so you get a second artifact. 2 artifacts in 1 card. You're going to be triggering your Captain Storm ability or some of the other pirates that care about artifacts coming in multiple times. So look for, again, things that create artifacts when they come into play, or that are artifacts themselves, or that are pirates. Pretty straightforward, pirates and artifacts. It's going to be a solid deck, I think. Black-red Descend Aggro, another tier 1 deck here, in my opinion. We've got Zoyoa Lava Tongue as the signpost uncommon, black-red for a 2/2 legendary goblin. It's got Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, each opponent may discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. This creature deals 3 damage to each opponent who did not do that. So a little bit to unpack here. Let's talk about what descended means first. It says right here on the card, you descended if a permanent card was put into your graveyard from anywhere. So if a creature died, if you sacrificed something, if you discarded a permanent card from your hand, just to be clear, a permanent card is anything that sort of sticks on the battlefield. So creature, artifact, enchantment, land would be the most common ones. So if you've descended at the end of your turn, an opponent can then discard or sack a permanent. So you're sort of wearing them down, and then if they choose not to do that, they're taking 3 damage. So in a case of something like this, we really want to make that 3 damage hurt, which means we want to be beating down. We want to be aggressive. We want to fill our deck with lots of cheap creatures that want to attack. And then hopefully if our opponent has to block and maybe trade off, their creature dies, our creature dies, and then they have to choose between taking an additional 3 damage or discarding a card or sacrificing another creature. You can see how this would quickly sort of wear an opponent down. So we're looking for cards that can help us descend. Something like Volatile Wanderglyph, which is a 1 and a red 2/2 artifact creature golem. When it becomes tapped, so most likely if you're just attacking with it, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So we could discard another creature that we're not going to use from our hand, or an artifact that we don't need, or something that maybe we want to be in the graveyard for some reason. Maybe we're doing some crafting or something in addition to this game plan. Then that's going to trigger that descend for our opponent at the end of turn. We could also mill ourselves with something like Screaming Phantom. 2 and a black, 2/2 flyer. When it attacks, we mill a card. So we put the top card of our library into the graveyard. So not super reliable, but you know, if we happen to hit a land or a creature artifact, something like that, then that will trigger the descend for us as well. Also should have mentioned with the Wander Glyph that we could discard a land card too. You'll do that quite often to that guy. And then another great way of doing this is the card Deadweight. A single black for an enchantment or an enchanted creature gets -2/-2. So if we were to put a Deadweight on our opponent's 2/2 creature, their creature dies, our Deadweight goes to the graveyard. That counts as descending and will trigger our Signpost Uncommon for us, among other things that care about descending in red and black. Please note, very important, that tokens do not count as descending. It's a kind of a weird rule here, but map tokens going to the graveyard, fungus tokens dying, treasure tokens being sacrificed does not count for descend. So please be aware of that. All right, moving to our tier 2 decks, we've got black-green descend, the only green deck that I think is amongst the tier 2 decks. Our Signpost Uncommon is Akawali the Seething Tower. 1 black-green for a 3/3 with Descend 4. As long as there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, it gets +2/+2 and has Trample. And Descend 8, as long as there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, it gets an additional +2/+2 and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So black-green, clearly all about getting as many permanents into the graveyard as possible. We want to hit Descend 4 with a good amount of regularity, and Descend 8 would be even better. So we want to make sure we're definitely hitting Descend 4 and try to hit Descend 8 as well in this deck. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way is probably to mill ourselves. So something like Deathcap Marionette here, 1 and a black for a 1/1 Death Touch. When it enters, you mill 2 cards. Really great way to sort of set up something on board, play a little bit of defense here. Your opponent's going to have trouble attacking through this, and start filling your graveyard. Something like Mineshaft Spider, similarly, plays defense really well. 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 3/4 reach. When it enters the battlefield, mill 2. And something like Another Chance, 2 and a black, mill 2 cards. Then you may return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this will be a great one to continue to fill your graveyard, but also capitalize on maybe some of the good creatures that you've milled over while doing that, and give you a little bit of late game play for the deck. Next, we'll look at blue-black Descend. Going to be a similar strategy here. Ukenbach, the Great Mistake, 3 blue-black for a 6/4 Vigilance Menace is our Signpost Uncommon. It has Descend 8. We could pay 4 blue and a black, so 6 mana total, to return it from our graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. And we can only activate that if we have 8 or more permanent cards in the graveyard, as per Descend 8. So the finality counter just means if it would die, it gets exiled instead. So we can't do this repeatedly, but I mean, even doing it once is pretty darn strong. So again, we're going to be looking to dump things in our graveyard as quickly as possible. Sage of Days does a really good job of this. 2 and a blue for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you can look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 back on top if you want, and put the rest into the graveyard. So we can either put all 3 into the graveyard, which I think will actually do quite a bit in this deck, or if there's something really sweet, we just need to hit a land, or we need a creature, or we need a removal spell, we can put that back on top and be sure to draw that on the following turn. Deathcap Marionette again, 2 mana 1/1 Death Touch, mill 2. And another good way to get things in the graveyard for Descend is the land cycling creatures. So here we have Rampaging Spiketail. Each color has one of these. This is the black one. It's 4 black for a 5/6. When it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains indestructible. It's just a big beater for 6 mana. But early in the game, we can swamp cycle it for 2 mana, which means we pay 2, we discard it, search for a swamp card, and put it into our hand. So this will help us get the lands that we need for the late game early on, and it also adds to the Descend count in the graveyard. All right, and moving on to another tier 2 deck here, white-red Aggro-Convoke. I'm using the word Convoke because I don't know what else to use for this, so the older players will know what I'm talking about, and I'll explain it right now. So we've got Caparakti. Oof, that's tough. Caparakti Sunborn is the Signpost Uncommon, 2 red-white for a 4/4. When it attacks, you may tap 2 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, discover 3. So the reason I'm saying Convoke is shorthand for tapping untapped artifacts and creatures you control. It's an old ability from an old set. It doesn't really matter. White-red wants you to tap your own stuff to power up some of these creatures like the Sunborn here. Okay, so what does Discover mean? Discover 3. Exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less. Cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So when you discover, you just flip cards off the top of your library until you hit something with the appropriate mana cost. So in this case, it could be a 1, 2, or 3 mana value card. So sometimes you will hit really small things. Then you get to play it right away for free, or you can put it into your hand if it's not appropriate for you to play it right there. If it's maybe it's like a removal spell you don't want to use yet, or a combat trick that you don't want to use yet, you can just put it into your hand. So just straight up raw card advantage, drawing an extra card, and sometimes getting a mana advantage too and putting it right into play. Very, very powerful. So we want to enable this as much as possible. We're looking for creatures and artifacts that want to become tapped. That's kind of a cool way to do it. Attentive Sunscribe is a 1 and a white 2/2 artifact creature. When it becomes tapped, you get to scry 1, so a little extra value there. Creatures with Vigilance are really good as well. I haven't mentioned those yet, but anything that doesn't have to tap to attack will do well there as well. Plundering Pirate, we've already looked at. This is 2 and a red 3/2 pirate. It enters the battlefield, creates treasure. This makes 2 things for you to tap. So anything that makes, 2 pieces of cardboard, as it were, 2 rectangles, 2 game pieces, or more even. In the case of Tinker's Tote, kind of the ultimate in this archetype, the 2 and a white artifact makes 2 tokens when it comes into place. This gives you 3 things to tap to help power up your stuff. These are all sort of examples of ways to maximize this archetype. And of course, as red-white typically is, we want lots of aggressive, low-costed creatures, get as much stuff on the board as quickly as possible, attack our opponent, and power up our Convoke, quote-unquote, cards. All right, on to Tier 3. So these are the decks I would say draft with caution, and I'll explain why. Black-White Sacrifice, the first of them. Signpost uncommon is Bartolome de Presidio. White-black for a 2/1. You can sacrifice another creature or artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on it. And what do we want to do with stuff that asks us to sacrifice things? We want lots of fodder for them. So something like Greedy Freebooter, single black for a 1/1. It wants to die. When it dies, scry 1 and create a treasure token. So stuff that has an effect when it dies, that's pretty powerful. And then stuff that dies and creates more stuff to sacrifice, which in this case, the Freebooter creates a treasure token for us. Those are usually important pieces in sacrifice-themed decks. Something like Mephitic Draft, 1 and a black for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard, you draw a card and lose a life. You can really maximize this by being able to sacrifice it easily with our Signpost uncommon. And this becomes 2 mana, draw 2, lose 2 life, which is a pretty good card. Plus the benefits you're getting from Bartolome. And a card like Blood Rage Mycoid, which creates an extra thing when it comes into play. So this is a 3 and a black, 4/3. Sorry, it doesn't, not when it comes into play. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended, create a 1/1 fungus creature token. So it creates extra stuff for us to sacrifice. It also cares about descend, which we will trigger by sacrificing things to our Bartolome or other cards that ask us to sacrifice. So the reason I have this in Tier 3 is I just don't think the support is there. The effects just aren't that powerful. And sacrificing our own stuff is typically not great, especially in Limited where like we really want to have a lot of creatures on board to be able to block or attack or whatever. So I would draft with caution, black-white. If you get a really, really good rare or something, for sure, feel free to draft it. But at common, it doesn't look like the support is really there. White-green Aggro Pump is next. Our signpost uncommon is Kutzil Malamet Exemplar. 1 green white for a 3/3. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Okay, so we got a couple things going on here. We want to buff our creatures, so when they hit our opponent, as buffed creatures, we get to draw a card. So that seems easy enough to pull off, but the nice little piece of text on this card is that our opponents can't cast spells during our turn, which means we're free to pump up our creatures without fear that our opponent might be able to remove them in response and really punish us for that. Our opponents won't be able to react to any of our pumping. So how are we going to pump? Well, pretty traditional way to do that is with a combat trick like Staggering Size. 1 and a green. For an instant, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample. So not only does this pump, it gives trample to make sure that damage gets through. So we get to draw a card off of the Malamet Explorer. Also, we have equipment. Pretty good way to do that as well. Deconstruction Hammer, single white for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has +1/+1. Equips for 1, and we can also pay 3 and tap the creature to sack the hammer and destroy an artifact or enchantment. Nice little bit of utility in a set with a lot of artifacts in it. Another great way to pump up our creatures is with +1/+1 counters. Iron Power Aspirant is a good example of this. 1 and a blue for a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, you get a +1/+1 counter on a creature. So it can target itself, it can target something else, and enable that increased power clause for you. And finally, we've got Explore as another great way to get +1/+1 counters. River Herald Guide here. 2 and a green for a 3/1 Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So again, you look at the top card. If it's a land, you get to draw it. Otherwise, this gets a +1/+1 counter, and you can put that card in your graveyard or put it back on top. So this coming down as a 3-mana 4/2. Then if it connects with your opponent, it's considered to be buffed because it's got a +1/+1 counter on it, and away you go. Okay, so yes, just before we move on to the next, actually. So again, this archetype just doesn't seem to be supported super well. There's definitely some stuff going on here, but I think without like multiple copies of the Signpost Uncommon and maybe like a good rare or two, I just don't think these cards are going to hold up against the more powerful craft strategies and artifact-based stuff in the format. So again, just draft with caution, but if you have a really good rare, definitely go into it. Dinosaurs is the next one, everybody's favorite. Dinosaurs. Red-green. Here's our Signpost Uncommon. Itzquinth, Firstborn of Gishath. It's green-red for a 2/3. Legendary dinosaur with haste. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2. When you do, target dinosaur you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. So a bunch going on here as well. This can just come down on turn 2 and attack your opponent, which is nice. It can come down on turn 4 and deal 2 to something by itself and then attack your opponent. That's pretty nice as well. Or it can come down later when you've got a bigger dinosaur and deal even more damage. So this is very, very powerful and a great reason to be in this deck. Obviously, we just want as many dinosaurs as possible. So some good ones at common are Armored Kincaller, 2 and a green for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you can reveal a dinosaur from your hand or just point at one that you have on the battlefield and gain 3 life. Or you've got Pathfinding Axejaw, 3 and a green for a 4/3 dino that explores when it comes into play. These are some really good common enablers for the deck. The problem I have with this deck is these are kind of it. The only, all the good dinosaurs are at uncommon, and there's almost none that cost 2 mana. The ones that do are at uncommon, and they're pretty darn good cards already, so they'll typically be hard to pick up in the draft. So this deck, it doesn't lack power. I just don't think that it's going to be all that easy to find the cards you want, which is why I have it in tier 3. So by all means, if you're picking up uncommon, really good, cheap dinosaurs late, go into it, but I wouldn't start here because I think it's going to be hard to draft this deck, especially if somebody else at the table is also trying to do so. All right. And finally, we've got Blue-Green Explore in the Tier 3 slot. Our Signpost Uncommon is Nickenzeal Current Conductor. It's green and blue for a 2/3 Legendary Merfolk. When a creature you control explores a land, you may put that land straight into play. That's pretty cool. And whenever a creature you control explores a non-land, this gets a +1/+1 counter, in addition to that creature also getting theirs. So obviously, this is just powering up our Explore. So we want a lot of cards that say Explore. All right, well, cheap cards that say Explore are really good anyways, so let's put them in our deck. Something like River Herald Scout, 1 and a blue for a 1/2, enters the battlefield, explores. Obviously really powerful. Seeker of Sunlight. There's a couple of other cards like this that are repeatable ways to explore, would be really nice in this deck. Single blue for a 1/1. You can pay 2 and a green to have it explore at sorcery speed. do this every turn, or multiple times a turn if we have a lot of lands. And something like Nurturing Bristleback is just a great thing to put into play once we've explored a ton of lands. This is another land cycler. Can cycle for a forest, or we can cast it for 5 green for 5/5 that makes a 3/3 dinosaur alongside it. So this deck, again, just doesn't seem to have a lot going on at common, and cards that explore are already going to be in high demand. So I don't think this deck is just going to come together all that often. Okay, our bonus archetype, Caves. If you've done a little bit of research on this set, you'll know about the Caves. I've got these in tier 4. So, and again, this video is a little bit more beginner focused, a little bit more like straight ahead. If you're trying to win, if you're trying to learn about how to play limited, I would avoid putting Caves in your deck. So let me talk a little bit about what the Caves deck is. So the Caves deck wants to draft as many of these cave lands as possible, like this Forgotten Monument here, to power up cards like Calamitous Cave-In. I'll read this one. This is 3 and a red for sorcery. It deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker, where X is the number of caves you control, plus the number of caves in your graveyard. So having a lot of caves in play or in graveyard, there's a card or 2 in each color that cares about that. So if you can get a bunch of caves, I'm talking like 8, 9, 10 caves in your deck, so that you can reasonably have like 4 or 5 of them in play in the mid game, then you can play Calamitous Cave-In, which is probably the best payoff, and kill all your opponent's stuff and try to win somehow. The problem with this deck is that you have to draft a lot of lands, which makes it difficult. You have to see a lot of caves in the draft, which may not always happen, and most of the caves only tap for colorless mana. So the reason I've highlighted these 3 cards here is because I think the only way this deck is going to work is if you have Compass Gnome, which is a 2-mana 2/1 that can search for a cave and put it on top, to search for your Forgotten Monument, which allows your caves to tap for a mana of any color, and then draft as many caves as you can and play your payoffs. So you can see I'm jumping through hoops, even trying to explain how this deck would work. There's a lot going on here, and I think this is going to come together once in a blue moon. If you're a new player or a player who just wants to win, or you know, somebody along those veins, anything that says cave, I would ignore in the draft. If you want to have some fun though, and try to get some cool screenshots for the memes, then definitely try this deck. I think it will be sweet if it comes together. I just don't think it will come together very often. All right, so reviewing our color pair tiers here, we've got blue-white, black-red, and blue-red in the first tier. So these are the decks that I think you want to go after most aggressively in the draft. Tier 2, red, white, black-green, and blue-black are great places to be if you say for example, we're trying to draft blue-white, and all of our blue dries up and we just have a bunch of white cards. Maybe we can move into white-red instead, you know. So Tier 2 is a great place to fall back on if Tier 1 doesn't happen. And then Tier 3, draft with caution. Again, if you open a really good rare, or maybe you get past a bunch of uncommons that really fit in these decks, they can be good, but these are not places that I would want to start in without having some serious reason to do so. Again, a really good rare, really good uncommons, etc. And then the Caves deck, just avoid it. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to actually navigate the draft with a little bit of pick order here. So the first thing we're going to be looking for when we open up a pack is the rare slot. We're going to be looking for bomb rares. These are rares that are 1 color or colorless, are not too expensive, and are super powerful. So stuff like Resplendent Angel, 1 white for a 3/3 flying. At the beginning of each end step, if you gained 5 or more life, you get a 4/4 Angel token, and you can pay 6 mana to give this +2/+2 in lifelink. Just takes over the game ball by itself. Bone Horde Dracosaur, 3 red for a 5/5 flying first strikes, already incredible. And then beginning of your upkeep, exile top 2 cards of your library. You can play them, so just drawing you extra cards. And if you exile lands, you get 3/1 creatures for free. So really busted. Oger Castlum Deepest Growth, 3 green, 6/5 trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, put a creature into play, so it just gives you free stuff. And then when it dies, it comes back as a land, and then you can transform it back into this creature again, so it just keeps coming back. Really busted. So if you open a really busted card, if it looks good, it probably is good. Take it, start with it, see what happens, especially early in the format. I like to try out as many of the rares as I can because some of them can be difficult to evaluate or really interesting to build around. So even if I lose a few games by picking a rare I shouldn't have, sometimes it's nice to just sort of try it out and find that out, because you don't get to see them all that often. After the rares, we're looking at the B-level cards. If anyone's listened to a lot of the podcasts out there, use the letter grades. So A's for the really good rares, B's for the top uncommons and commons. So I'll highlight a few of the strongest cards in each color here. I'll start with the colorless. We've got Scampering Surveyor. This will be a great first pick because it doesn't commit you to any color or color pair. It's a 4-mana artifact creature. It's 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you search for a basic land or cave, put it right into play, and shuffle. So really powerful in any deck. Certainly the cave part doesn't matter at all. You're just happy to play a 4-mana artifact that counts for all your artifact stuff and gets you a land. Really good. In white, we've got Spring-Loaded Sawblades, 1 and a white for a flash artifact, deals 5 damage to target creature, tapped creature and opponent controls, and then can craft for 3 and a white into a 5/5 vehicle that you can either crew with 2 artifacts or with a 1-power creature. So kill something early. You can sacrifice this to craft if you need to, or you can craft it into a 5/5 and kill them with it. A lot of value here. Kinjali's Dawn Runner, 2 and a white for a 1/1 double strike. Enters the battlefield, explores. Explores really good. A 3-mana 1/1 double strike, draw a land is really good. And a 3-mana 2/2 double strike that maybe put something into your graveyard for other purposes is also really good. And that also triggers for white's buffed stuff as well, because it'll be a 2/2. Old Tech Cloud Guard, 3 and a white for a 3/2 flying. This is a common, so really important to keep tabs on the most powerful commons. When it enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1 artifact token. Makes 2 things, has flying, etc., etc. Next, we've got Ruin Lurker Bat, single white, 1/1 flying lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended, you scry 1. So a little bit of upside on already a really good 1-drop. You want to put a lot of stuff into play early with the white decks, and this will be a little bit better in the white-red style of deck than the white-blue style, but still really powerful. Petrify. This is another common, 1 and a white for an enchantment aura, enchant artifact or creature. Can't attack or block, activated abilities can't be activated. So typically these rate a little bit lower than B, but in this set I'm not seeing very much removal at all. So it's possible that we'll just need to prioritize the good removal where we can get it, because a lot of the removal just isn't that strong or isn't there at all. So I've got Petrify as a top white common. We've also got Tinker's Tote. We've already talked about this one. 3-mana artifact makes 2 things. Really powerful in all the white decks that want it. Clay-Fired Bricks, 1 and a white for an artifact. Enters the battlefield, search for a basic plains, put it into hand and gain 2 life. And then for 7 mana, you can craft it into an artifact that makes 2 things and gives your team +1/+1. So kind of like a 4-for-1 or something like that if you get to do that. And Mischievous Pup, 2 and a white for a 3/1 flash. When it enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So lots of good stuff with enters the battlefield effects that you'd want to get back. Pick up our Tinker's Tote, play it again, make 2 more things. You see, yeah, you get the idea here. All right. In blue, we've got Waterwind Scout, which we've talked about. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flyer that makes a map. Staunch Crewmate, really powerful in the Pirates deck. 1 and a blue for a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can reveal an artifact or pirate, put it into your hand, and the rest in the bottom. So these can find each other. They can find your other pirates. It's even good in blue-white, where you're looking for a lot of artifacts. Just pick up an artifact. Just really, really good. And Spyglass Siren, single blue, 1/1 flyer, creates a map when it comes into play. It's like even better Waterwind Scout. That's an uncommon. I should mention that Waterwind Scout is a common, so you will see these, and they're very, very good. Chart a Course at uncommon here. 1 and a blue, sorcery, draw 2 cards. Discard a card unless you attacked. So if you're pressuring your opponent, you get 2 mana, draw 2. If you're trying to fill your graveyard, you get to discard a card to help with the send. And Zoetic Glyph, 2 and a blue for an aura, enchant artifact, is a golem creature base power and toughness 5/4, and when this is put into a graveyard, discover 3. So if you've got a lot of cheap artifacts that you're putting into play, you can make one of them into a big creature that dies into another thing. Pretty darn good. In black, Chupacabra Echo, 2 black for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls give -X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanents in your graveyard. So even if this is just like you get 2 things in your graveyard, that's still quite good. And then obviously any more than that, it just gets even better and better. So if you can build into it a little bit, it'll really pay off for you. Bitter Triumph, one of the better removal spells in the set. 1 and a black for an instant. As an additional cost, discard a card or pay 3 life to destroy target creature or planeswalker. Can't have too many of these. Obviously, paying 3 life is kind of a big deal, but the first one's going to be amazing, and I think you're happy with 2 of these, and it's uncommon, so you probably won't get more than 2 anyways. Deep Cavern Bat is another nice one. 1 and a black for a 1/1. Flying lifelink when it enters the battlefield. Look at target opponent's hand. Exile a non-land card from it until this leaves the battlefield. So you get a nice little lifelinker early. Get to disrupt their game plan. Really powerful. Black's also got dead weight, I should say. Single black enchant creature gets -2/2. And Skullcap Snail, similar to the bat here, but maybe actually better than the bat. 1 and a black for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent exiles a card from their hand. So you don't get to choose what it is, but they also don't get it back if this thing dies. So you're happy to sacrifice this for some benefit if you're trying to do that. Yeah, really good. And the exile on both of these creatures I mentioned is really nice because obviously people are trying to fill their graveyards for craft and descend, and exiling just doesn't let them do that. It gets rid of the card completely. Okay. One more black card to talk about here. Visage of Dread. 1 and a black for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you look at an opponent's hand, choose an artifact or creature, and that player discards that card. So getting rid of something that really matters most of the time. Most of the cards we care about in this set are going to be creatures and artifacts. And then later on, we can craft with 2 creatures. So we can exile 2 creatures we have in play or in graveyard or some combination of the 2. 1 and 1 it would be. And so 5 and a black, craft with 2 creatures, turns into a 5/4 menace that when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may mill 2 cards. So just a lot of value here. 2 mana, take something out of their hand, and then later on you get a creature. Okay, in red, we've got Triumphant Chomp, single red for sorcery, deals 2 to a creature, or the greatest power among dinosaurs you control, whichever is greater. So really efficient sorcery speed removal here in Triumphant Chomp. Fits in any deck, not just the Dinosaurs deck, so don't be afraid to put this in your blue-red Pirates deck. It'll do a lot of work for you. We also have Geological Appraiser, 2 red for a 3/2 creature. If you cast it, discover 3 when it comes into play. So you're getting a 4-mana 3/2 plus a random 1, 2, or 3 from your deck, most likely a 2-drop. So if this is making a second creature for you, that's really, really nice in any deck, as certainly in the red-white deck. It's going to really appreciate that. And then the real cream of the crop here, saving the best for last, Abrade. This is a common 1 and a red instant. 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. There's lots of artifacts that we're going to want to destroy in this set. Sometimes people have paid 6 or 7 mana to craft some big artifact. You just blow it up for 2 mana. They're going to be pretty sad about that. Or dealing 3 to a creature early on is really powerful. This is a common. There's going to be very few occasions where you don't just take this, I think. There'll be some rares that are better than it. Maybe some uncommons. This is on the level of the best uncommons. So just be aware of that. Belligerent Yearling, 1 and a red for a 3/2 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, when another dinosaur, enters the battlefield, you may have Belligerent Yearling's base power become equal to that creature's power until end of turn. So if you have this in play and you play a 4/4, this becomes a 4/2. Nice little upside here, but it's already a 2-mana 3/2 trample. Any red deck is going to want this, which is part of the reason why I think the Dinosaurs deck is going to be hard to put together, because you need good 2-drops and people are just going to be taking this. But it's really good, so take it if you open it. Dreadmaw's Ire, single red for an instant. Till end of turn, target attacking creature gets +2/+2 and trample. And when this deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact that player controls. This is so much for 1 mana. You're killing the creature that blocked your creature, most likely. You're probably trampling over for 1 damage or more, and then you're blowing up one of their artifacts, of which every deck is going to have artifacts in play. Yeah, this card's really good. Sideclaw Raptor, 2 and a red for a 4/3 dinosaur. It's another premium dinosaur. Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, it deals 4 damage to them. So really going to punish opponents who are trying to kill your creatures at instant speed or use combat tricks or whatever to defend against your creatures. 4 damage is a huge amount of damage. And this already being a 3-mana 4/3 is quite aggressively costed. Moving on to green. C-Note Scout, single green for a 1/1 that explores. Lot to like there. Just really, really good. Thrashing Brontodon, 1 green for a 3/4 dinosaur. Really good stats. It's a dinosaur. It's nice. Pay a mana, sacrifice to destroy target artifact or enchantment. We know why that's good. So just a real good one there. And River Herald Guide at common. 2 and a green for a 3/1 vigilance. When it enters, it explores. So these are really the only 3 green cards I want to highlight here. Again, I'm kind of talking down green. It's just not a lot of power in this color, but these are 3 of the better cards. So if you're seeing these later in your packs, maybe you want to move into green. All right, so recap here, pick order. We're taking our A's first, our bomb rares. We're taking our B's after that, top uncommons and commons. Then we're looking for our signpost uncommons, which we outlined in the archetype section. And past that, we're looking at C-level cards, which are filler cards, not as powerful as the signposts or the top uncommons and commons, but cards that fit with the archetype. So again, for example, if we're in blue-white, we've taken a good rare, couple of good uncommons, or we found the blue-white signpost uncommon, we're going to start taking artifact cards or cards that make artifacts, even if they're not as powerful as the cards that we started with. Okay, and then D's, we will end up with a few of these at the end of the packs. These are cards that we sometimes play, but most often we don't. So could just be a card that's just not that efficient. Maybe it's like a 4-mana 3/3 with an ability or something like that. Hoping not to play that, but maybe if it fits really well with our deck, we will. All right, I'm going to highlight the good combat tricks in the set. So these are cards that people are going to try to play when a creature is attacking. It becomes blocked. Maybe the attacking player is going to try to buff their creature to kill the blocker, or maybe the blocking player is going to try to buff their blocker to kill the attacker. If you're a fan of data, if you're a fan of the site 17lands.com, which I am, these cards will always perform a little bit better in the data than their sort of actual draft value is. You don't need to take these as highly as their data will indicate, but they are good and you should be aware of them and you should try to put them in your deck as well. So, for example, if somebody's got a white mana available and you're attacking, think about whether or not they could have Acrobatic Leap, which is single white for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+3, gains flying, and it untaps. So even if they've got no untapped blocker, they could surprise you and eat one of your creatures. So just be aware of that. This one will be pretty annoying to play against. Ancestor's Aid, 1 and a red for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+0, gains first strike, and you get a treasure. So quite nice in the decks that want extra artifacts like white-red and blue-red. And of course, +2/+0 first strike is going to win a lot of combats for you. Cosmium Blast. This isn't exactly a combat trick, but it does deal with attacking or blocking creatures. There's a couple of cards in white that do something similar here. 1 in a white instant, deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Just watch out if your opponent's kind of sitting there. They don't have a lot of creatures, but they do have an untapped plains and another land. Be wary of attacking. They might snap this off and kill your creature. Sometimes you just have to let that happen, but you can always sort of be aware of it and see if there's something else that you could do. Staggering Size we looked at already. 1 in a green instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 and trample. Cogwork Wrestler. We also looked at this one, but we'll reiterate it here. Single blue for a 1/2 creature, but it has flash. So it can come down. If you're attacking your opponent, they've got a blue up. They could play this. And when it enters the battlefield, it can shrink a creature's power by 2. So you attack with your 2/2. They block with their 2/2, and then they play this thing, and your thing is dead, and they have now an extra creature in play. That's kind of a bummer, so be aware of this one. And Fungal Fortitude, 1 and a black for an enchantment aura with flash. Enchant creature gets +2/+0, and when it dies, it comes back. So part Probably going to get played a little bit less than these other 5, but worth knowing about for sure. And then there's a couple of other combat tricks in the set, but they're either at higher rarities or aren't as powerful as these, so I have not mentioned them here. And finally, we'll talk about land cyclers and hidden lands. These are cycles of cards, not to be confused with cycling. Each color has one of these. This is a creature that can cycle for a land that matches its color. So, for example, here we've got Marauding Brine Fang, 5 blue for a 6/7 with ward 3. And you can cycle it for 2 mana to find an island. So each color has one of these. They're all 6 or 7 mana to cast, I think. Maybe one of them costs 5, actually. Anyways, yeah, these are all pretty good. And I'm going to say the same thing about the next batch of cards we're going to look at. If there's nothing exciting in the pack and this matches your colors that you're in, it's always good to just sort of pick one of these up. I think every deck kind of wants one of these. And certainly if you're doing Descend stuff, you're going to want extra. The other cycle to talk about is the hidden lands. Each color has one of these. This is the red one. It enters tapped. It counts as a cave, which again, don't do the cave thing, but if you are doing the cave thing, then these are caves. It taps for a red, and you can pay 4 and a red, sacrifice it to discover 4 as a sorcery. So the first copy of these is going to be pretty nice, I think, in any deck. So if you just happen to be in red, you're not doing the cave thing, you're not doing the descend thing even, you might still just want to play one of these. Pretty low opportunity cost and can give you a little bit of value later on in the game. Okay, I think I've explained these as best I can. So pick those up if there's nothing else exciting in the pack. They're pretty good. Okay, so recap our draft strategy and be a little bit more specific about things. In the first 3 picks, we're going to just take the best card that we see. Hopefully it's a mono-colored card if we can, so it's going to be a rare. It's going to be one of the good uncommons or one of the top commons. Picks 4 to 8, we're going to continue to just keep taking the best card. Don't worry too much about what color we're in. But we're going to start to read signals, which means we're going to start to form a picture of what's being passed to us. So if we're seeing good cards of a certain color in picks 4 through 8, or maybe a really good signpost uncommon, we're going to start to make note of that and say, okay, we're seeing a lot of red. We're going to sort of take note of that, and maybe we're going to lean towards red as a color that we think the other people to our right are not drafting. Picks 9 through 14, as we mentioned very early on in the video, this is known as the wheel. So the packs are going to go all the way around the table, and then on pick 9, you're going to see it again. And pick 10, you're going to see a pack again that you've seen before, pick 11, etc. This is known as the wheel, and actually this should say 9 through 15. There's 15 cards in these packs, and hasn't always been the case in previous sets. Yeah, so the wheel... now we actually get to see what hasn't been taken. So if there was a good blue card in the first pack that we were like, oh yeah, that's, it's not the best card here, it's not the worst card here, it's pretty good though, and we see it come all the way around the table, and you think, man, somebody should have taken that, then that's an indicator that maybe nobody or very few people, maybe only one other person is drafting blue, and that can give you a really good indicator to move into blue. Now, if you're seeing multiple picks 9, 10, 11, 12, you're seeing blue cards, then it's really time to think about moving into blue because maybe nobody at the table is drafting it, and that means we're going to get paid off in a huge way in Pack 2 and Pack 3. By the end of Pack 1, we want to try to identify our main color. This is the color that we have the most cards of and or the most amount of powerful cards of. And we want to stay as close to one color as we can by the end of Pack 1. So somewhere in picks 4 through 8, we're going to sort of identify this is the color we're in, and we're going to try to, 9 through 14, take as many of that color as we can. Unless we start to see a lot of a different color in that wheel area, then maybe we'll jump ship. In packs 2 and 3, continue to take powerful cards of our main color where possible. Let the good cards we open or get past determine our secondary color and final archetype. And we want to ignore the signals in packs 2 for the most part. The packs are moving in the opposite direction, so the signals can be very different from what we saw in pack 1. So as I said before, if we decided that blue was open in pack 1, lots of people were passing us blue cards. In pack 2, we're not going to see as many because the packs are going the opposite direction. But in pack 3, we should again see those blue cards coming to us because the direction is again the same as it was in pack 1. So don't get too scared off if your color dries up in pack 2. Let's try to grab some stuff for a secondary color, and then that initial color should be there for you again in pack 3. Some deck building tips before we go here. Stick with 2 colors. This set does not have very good mana fixing, so I would really advise playing 2 colors. Avoid playing a 3rd color at all costs unless you specifically design your deck to do so. You always want to play 17 lands in a draft deck. Unless you have a deck with no cards that cost more than 4 mana, then you can think about playing 16 lands. In this set in particular, especially with Craft, there might even be a lot of decks that want to play 18 lands because there's so much to do with your mana in the late game. So just be aware of that, but 17 is a good place to start. And you always want to play a low curve in Limited. You want 6 or more 2-drops, 2 mana value cards, 4 or more 3 mana value cards, some 4, and very few 5 or more cards. And especially in this set with cards having Craft, some cards costing 2 mana and then having like a 6 or 7 mana Craft ability, we really do not need expensive cards in this set. So really prioritize those early cards. And 1-drops as well. I didn't mention 1-drops here, but those can sort of count as your 2 mana value cards as well. So if you've got 6 1 and 2 mana value cards, you're in a pretty good spot, but 8 is fine too, even 10. You want a lot of cheap stuff. A lot of cheap stuff. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Please click like, please click subscribe to support the channel. Leave your questions in the comment section below. Would love to hear from you. If you'd like to contact me directly, you can do so at howtodraftmtg@gmail.com. Best of luck in your drafts. We'll see you very soon with some more draft videos. Bye for now.